Oh, all right, we're getting this set up as we speak. Um, so here we go. We're getting this set up as people are coming in. All right, all right, all right, all right. All right, all right, all right. So there we go. All right. Um, so let me keep track to make sure people are coming in. Okay, here we go. Little technical difficulties today, which is kind of cool since we're talking about technology. And the idea of overcoming AI phobia, right? Because a lot of people seem to have it, right? And so, you know, as we get started, what is AI phobia? It's basically it's a focused version of technophobia, fear of AI, robots, advanced technologies, all that good kind of stuff. And of course, the symptoms are anxiety, heart rate, you get upset, and it can stop you from using the new tools. Depending on your age, we see people, my group, the I guess Xers, not Xers, what do we call them? Boomers. One of the things that happened is, we could think back when, the computers took off and the internet and all that, and then people wouldn't use just about any kind of technology. So the fear is there, right? Same with like our wonderful cell phones, people get used to it. So, this one's been kind of exaggerated because of all the media portrayals of a dystopian AI future. Some of it is just stressing what could be negative impacts of it, because will it cause job loss and disruptions in some of the parts of the economy? Yes. And I heard one guy talking about it. He goes, if you go all the way back to when Henry Ford started the assembly line, where the car moved down rather than the workers doing the other thing, it made it more efficient. And one of the things that it did is it made cars much more affordable, and because they needed less employees. And a lot of us have seen this happen, maybe some for the good, some for the bad, but as automation comes in. And then we also get locked into some of the negative experience with AI generated stuff. And I always think of movies with this. If you go back and you go to the 80s and 90s when CGI, which is basically an AI, was first coming out. And if you see those movies today, you can, we'll say they're cheesy, right? Heck, if you go all the way back to 70s, Star Trek was a little ship on a string, So, but if you just, and now with this AI generated stuff, we see a lot of it with the videos that it's not the best AI generation. So, so it just leads to more negatives, right? So, but we have to remember that the power of AI it's inevitable. Once the technology is released, it doesn't go back in the bottle. And my favorite Star Trek quote is resistance is futile, right? So how do you overcome this? And if one of the ways is to start to reframe with rather than calling it like technophobia or AI phobia, it's a nervousness about the new technology. But it's rooted in the amygdala's response to uncertainty and threat, right? So it's a survival instinct. It goes to the amygdala, the deeper part of your brain. It has to do with loss of control. Maybe there's that you're losing control, and the invasion of privacy and all that, which that one always makes me laugh because I always see people posting on Facebook that I'm not gonna, Facebook, that scam that goes around that you can't use any of my pictures or things. It's like, I respect my privacy. Well, if you really did, you probably wouldn't be on Facebook. But it's you know, the image, illusion of privacy and the diminishment of human value, right? And so what are some of the symptoms of it, if you want to call it technophobia, but whether it's AI or you can think about just about anything. Rapid heartbeat, shortness of breath, sweating, chills. You get so upset you might start shaking. You get, muscle tension. You might feel dizzy. There's, all kinds of stuff, right? That's physical symptoms. Then you get, and it could be any kind, someone close to me just had to upgrade their phone. They haven't upgraded their phone in a long time. Well, their phone broke, basically, right? And I think it was an 8, and they needed to get a different phone. And you could see all the symptoms, right? And then you become it brings up the feeling of helplessness, like, oh, will I be able to use the new phone, whether it's whatever, iPhone 16 or whatever it is, or this or that. There's that fear, and that's normal because it's new technology, it's new stuff. You don't know what you don't know. And then, what happens with AI too is you feel like you're left behind, right? And then you start, avoidance behaviors. The person, I've done this when I needed to upgrade my phone. I avoided it. I refused to think about I needed to upgrade my phone. That was a year or two ago. I kept trying to make it work, taking it in, and they're finally like, you just need a new phone, man. And then I wanted to critique the changes and advancements, right? Because my old phone would get stuck in searching for 5G and there's no way to turn it off, which would run the battery down very fast, especially when I was traveling. And so my first response was that, like, diminishing it, saying it's not that good. But it was impacting my quality of life because I travel, and then I was traveling more. And, I need my cell phone to not just make a phone call to home or business. I could do a lot from my cell phone. But it's generally, we see some of this. We used to see it just with older people, but now it ripples down through, right? And so the impact of it is it blocks learning and adaptation to new technologies, right? Which we're going to leverage that when we get into how do you overcome this, right? And again, you avoid the new technology everywhere, right? And then, of course, it can be amplified by, you just see the news or something, and they talk about how AI is going to impact this, that, or the other thing, right? We're seeing it here in the States with they want to radically downsize the federal government, and they're stressing it'll be done by AI, the Veterans Administration, Social Security, Medicare, all these other things, right? And so there will be some changes, right? And so, you don't want to be left behind is what happens. I tell the story I told before, where I was at a conference, and it was a very conservative group, National Guild of Hypnotists. Some people are quite familiar with it. And it was probably early 2000s, right? And we were at an instructors meeting, and they were talking about like updates and this and that. And they go, well, just keep keep an eye out for the emails. We'll be emailing you the updates. We'll be emailing you this. We'll be emailing you that. And the person leading it was always on the cutting edge of technology. He's since passed away. His name was Elsa Eldridge, a guy I try to model, because even up to the very end, he was constantly trying new technologies, new information, and things like that. But then someone in the audience asked him, for those of us that don't have emails, are you just going to, mail all these updates? And you could tell it kind of caught him off guard, because he went, well, if you don't have email, I'm not quite sure we want to do business with you much longer, right? And of course, it caused a little thing, but it was like, yeah, it's just the way it is, one of my, one was when we switched to everything going online, you know? And then after talking to him, my late friend Elsom, he goes, well, you can be, the wave can overtake you or you can ride the wave. So I was doing online sessions back when it was GoToMeeting. There wasn't even Zoom. There wasn't, any of this, right? And unfortunately, I still kind of do it a little bit with IT marketing, internet marketing. In fact, I'm working on a project right now for my books. So, it's just the way that it goes. So the benefits of overcoming an AI phobia, right? Is then you can ride the wave rather than have the wave overtake you, right? And just look, and I use the cell phone analogy because I'm stealing this from someone else who was talking about this, a psychologist that, was talking about it, is the rapid breakthroughs in cell phone technology a lot of us experienced where, when they first when we could put emails on our phone, we could do this, right? Kind of like when one of the last jobs before I got really into NLP and training and went back to school and all the stuff I do now, I had a sales job. And I was selling computer maintenance programs for mainframe IBM computers. The they were called 3090s. They were huge. They would take up a whole room. You had to have the air-conditioned room. You had to do this, right? And so I was selling the maintenance programs for it, from a different company besides IBM. Anyway, when I first started, you had to call the office 2 or 3 times a day to get your messages, find out what's going on. Then they gave you a beeper. And some of the older guys, and this was back in the mid 80s, they didn't even want the beeper, right? And then I was there long enough, and it was the company I worked for was Bell Atlantic. And so they actually had the cutting edge. So they gave us all bag phones, if you remember those, the big bag phones. And I was excited, woo, have the phone, you can make calls, and do this. But a couple of the older guys were bitching because they're like, now you can't hide. Because if you were driving, this was in the Chicagoland area, and, if they beeped you, if you didn't want to get back, you could say, I was stuck in traffic, right? Or I was in a sales call, right? And so now that you had your bag phone, it's like, nope, you got like 10 minutes to get back to us. If you're in a sales situation, doing a sales pitch, excuse yourself as soon as you can and call back, right? So it did change the work. It made things easier because then if you were running late to an appointment or running late, you could make the phone call. But it was that pushback against it, right? And so the best ways to do it, there is basic NLP techniques, which we'll be doing in a moment, right? Reframing, anchoring, and of course the fast phobia technique, right? And one of the first things you can do is think of examples. If you're going to talk to somebody that had an AI phobia, is examples of overcoming just basically a fear. You were afraid to do something and now you love it, right? I was helping, a lot of you know her or know of her because she's around, my wife, Christina. I was talking about something. I said, remember when we were going to get a new car, right? And had to get a new truck. And well, we didn't have trucks then. She had a big Ford Expedition. And we went to look, but the best deal we could get was on a Dodge Ram, 4-door, big ass truck. And she's like terrified of it, right? And we had to buy the car and then she had to go on a trip. And I'm like, well, if you don't like it, after you get up there, she's going back to Indiana to do something. Plus, we had horses. She had a horse, so it would be easier to haul stuff rather than in the back of an Expedition because we were going to buy another one of those. And I said, if you don't like it, and she goes, well, you can't take the car back. I go, no, I'll get the Expedition, and for you, and I'll drive the Ram. And so after she got used to it, which was rather quickly, she hates driving anything but a pickup truck. Which is kind of funny because now she's the more redneck than I am. I drive the little Jeep car and she drives the big old Ram. But it became, then she saw that you had to do it to understand the benefits of it, being throwing stuff in the back. You still had, you know, a, it was a four-door thing, crew cab, so it's huge on the inside. So that's an example of using positive associations, or when you first upgraded your phone from some of us can remember this because I see people on the call, that when we had flip phones, right? And then we went from the flip phone to the first smartphone, and at first a lot of us fought it, but now you wouldn't want to go back, to the, unless you're getting a burner phone because you're doing other things, right? So, and so how you do this is, of course, you find a positive, resourceful state of confidence and calmness, and you create that physical anchor. I like to go right to the reframing aspect of, now you love this truck, or you love this car, or you like your new phone, whatever it happens to be. So, because then you're creating the pathway in your brain that your brain knows how to do. And if you're talking to somebody that has this phobia, and this could be for anyone, is find an example where they overcame it, right? And then intensify the positive state, right? My wife's case is like, isn't it nice? We got trucks that, like, for a while, we both had big trucks, right? That you could throw stuff in the back, get hay, move stuff around. If somebody needs something, it's kind of cool being the person everybody calls because you got a truck and you can like haul stuff. So that's the positive state. And I always create internal anchors, right? And you keep repeating the strengthening of this association. And you can find others. I'd say, like, in this case, like getting the new car, upgrading your phone, doing this, doing that, right? And then you have the anchor that when you start working with the AI fear, the techno fear that they're afraid of, you already have the triggers, right? And this helps change, this is the changing the perspectives of it, right? And a lot of this is done in the pre-talk, if you want to say that, if you're a hypnotist, because I'm convinced the real work in hypnosis and therapy is what you say as you're getting started, and then what you say at the very end. Sometimes the middle stuff, what we put all the faith in, the techniques, if you look at the research, it's kind of like, right? Because if you've already started the path where they're thinking about, I bought this different kind of car, and then I really liked it, right? The new car, and I wouldn't want to go back to the old car, or I like this new phone, I wouldn't want to go back. This already starts the pathway, and your brain seems to always look for the easiest way, right? And then you just have to begin to shift the perspectives, right? Identifying the current negative frames surrounding whatever it is you're afraid of. My wife was afraid because trucks are big, right? And it was even a lot bigger than her expedition. So it'd be, she never had a pickup, right? And I always say, if it's a valid fear, you say, well, yeah, you got to get used to it, right? In fact, not, and then you explore different perspectives or interpretation of what's going on, right? Of course, you're a little bit nervous. You never drove a truck. Of course, you're a little bit nervous. You never had this advanced iPhone, right? And then, but think about, select a new, more empowering frame as you go back and think about the time you overcame that fear, right? And this is what you want to begin to do, right? And so that's already the setup. Then you would do the fast phobia technique, right? And I'll do a quick example of it, right? But to me, a lot of the work's been done with diminishing the anchor and, looking at what the biases and the fears really are. What are they afraid of? And admitting the truth, never deny, like, will this change a lot of businesses? Yes. In fact, a friend of mine and I were talking about, it's really impacted companies like Fiverr and Upwork, if you're familiar with those, where you outsource work to other parts of the world where they do the work a lot cheaper. Because there's an AI app for it. You don't need somebody to do the research. Used to be, I was doing something a few years ago, and I needed all this research to back up what I was doing. So I went on Fight, I think it was Upwork, and paid somebody to do a APA style, American Psychological Association style research to give me all the stuff I needed for the back, And now, you got Chat GPT, Perplexity, the Google one, Notebook, is it Notebook KL? All of these things can do a lot of this work for you, right? And so it's impacting. Yes, it's taking, those jobs will disappear, right? Why would I pay someone $20 to format? I just did this, format or transcribe an audio and then make a format for an article, right? Or like talking point, teaching points, right? I could do that, but then, when someone showed me how one of the AIs could you just enter it, they take it, then gave me the beautiful thing, right? A friend of mine's a medical doctor, and we were talking about this a while ago, and he goes, well, a lot of doctors will hate to admit this, but they'll go, they'll be talking to you, and then especially if something they haven't done, they'll use one of the AIs that can do deep research, Perplexity, and there's one for just for medicine. I forget the name of it, right? So it'll go in and it says like, look at all this data. If these are the symptoms, what are some of this? And give me a treatment protocol. And they go, boom, right? And the research actually says it's more current, more cutting edge, and more up to date and effective than just what a typical MD would or DO would come up with, because they're looking at all the current data and all of this other stuff, right? So yeah, so it's very powerful. We're seeing it, and that's a big fear of it, And the second big fear, and then we're going to do the phobia technique, is it seems to diminish the human value, right? So, because if AI can like write your outline, does it diminish you because you could write the outline, right? But it'd be kind of like, in the start of World War One, a lot of Americans had horses outside of some of the big cities, but even then they had cities, right? It's because it's the only way you had to get around, right? And then, once cars got affordable because of Ford in the assembly line, which then all of the car people started doing it. So the Ford, changed it by the late 1920s. Most people had automobiles, and only a few people had horses. In fact, a friend of mine named Bruce and I were talking, it's like back in the 1800s, the poor people had horses. It's the only way they had to get around. And at first, just the rich people got the cars, the crank cars, the steam cars. But as soon as the technology improved, and we had the Model T, and I forget what the first like Chevrolet or Plymouth was, but they came out, so people started buying cars. And then by the late 1920s, 30s, 40s, it flipped all the way around, where working people, most people had cars, and only the wealthy had horses. All right. So that reframe can go in someone's head when it comes to AI and things like that, where, right, when it first comes out, only the techno wizards are getting into it, right? But why not jump on that frame where you're one of the ones that'll be, like you say, riding the wave rather than being overwhelmed by the wave, right? So here is the fast phobia technique. And I have a handout that goes with this, a study guide that I'll be sending out soon, right? It's all done. Guess who did it? AI did it, right? I just fed the data in, tweaked it a little bit, and we're good. So the fast phobia technique has not really changed in a long, long time. So it's first you acknowledge the fear and you get the symptomology. How bad is this fear? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being you can't, you'll throw up and curl up in the corner if you had to do something, to 0 is absolutely calm. Where is the fear? Most people only want to make a change, it seems like, if the fear is stopping them from doing it, right? So let's say it's a minimum 6, or usually 6, 7, 8, or 9, right? So you have a baseline, right? And then I always start with, and it's not in the handout because this is something I just teach, which is, okay, now we're going to start working on this. So think about the fear and that of this. Where do you feel it in your body? Good, because it's a somatic response. It's a physical response. Now what I'd like you to do is just kind of clear your mind and think about someone you love, and that you encourage. Could be a kid, a pet, your significant other. So think about them. So you have that feeling of love, right? And of course, you would nurture them and support them and help them get better. So just find, where do you feel that in your body? Good. So now what I would like you to do is just take a deep breath and close your eyes. And imagine you're walking into a movie theater. And it's your private movie theater, so only you're in the room. It's comfortable. It's great. And you look up on the screen and there's a picture of you today. You're fine, right? And now what you're going to do is you're kind of drift back out of yourself till you're in the projection booth looking at yourself, look at the screen. Now what's interesting is the screen's going to kind of evolve, segue into how you have this phobic response around this AI, right? Well, what's going to be interesting is we're going to make a change in a moment, right? What's going to happen, rather than jump to that, your brain drifts back to times in your life where there was some new technology, some new material, something that like you were hesitant to use, and now you wouldn't want to not use it. Like my wife and her truck, or when maybe you resisted getting a cell phone or setting up your website or doing all this other stuff, right? So your brain already knows how to do this, right? So you're watching that movie of you overcoming that, reframing it, going, oh, okay, yeah, there was a learning curve involved, of course, even when you just upgrade a phone from one model to the next, there's a learning curve. Buttons are different things. It's fine. You just have to give yourself some slack to learn it. And you went through that. Now you watch the movie, watch yourself watch the movie of this negative response with the AI, and it goes all the way up to today. You're fine. But then what's going to kind of happen in a moment, we're going to have you step into the movie and run it backwards and in color. See, hear, and feel it. So take a deep breath, drift right out of the projection booth, right into the movie, and run it backwards and in color. And hear circus music, right? And you kind of think about, when I was afraid of getting the new phone or starting to use email or internet marketing, it's kind of silly now, So now watch the movie again, up to today, step into it, run it backwards and in color, and hear do 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 do. Great. Now step out and watch the movie, and it's going to take off from this point where you are today, and it's going to jump ahead a few weeks or a couple of months where you've overcome this, you're comfortable with it, you've decided which kind of AI you like, you're getting very comfortable with it, and you look back to that you where you had that stuck state, and it's like, I'm glad I made this change. Same way you get a new phone, you get a new house, you get a new car, whatever it is, right? And you adapt it to the learning curve, and you give yourself some love, care, and nurturing to experience this process, right? And you enjoy it. Good. And now come out of the movie theater. And again, just sit there and then look up on the screen. And if you watch movies or television, think about how AI, which is what CGI is, computer generated images, has changed everything. It's just a story now as you're relaxing. I was watching an interview with an actor, and he talked about he had to learn a different skill set to act on a CGI stage where the whole stage is green. He's wearing he was in his costume or his wardrobe, but then they had someone dressed that was going to be the monster. It was a horror thing, but all they were doing was wearing this green thing, had little dots all over them. It's how they use it. And he goes, it was kind of weird at first, but now he's very comfortable with it as soon as he did it a few times, right? And that's what's going to happen here as you become more comfortable with it, right? And how prevalent is that? Well, a lot of the acting schools in New York, LA, Atlanta, London, Mumbai, they actually have classes set up for actors to learn how to act in CGI stuff, right? If they're going to be interacting with it, And because that's going to be a skill set that they have to have going into the future, right? And so why not ride the wave? And that's what this actor said. He wanted to learn how to do it so he could ride the wave, so he could be in the action movies or the horror movies in a different way. He had to encourage himself to do that. So I will be sending out the study guide with the written steps for these, exploring the reframing and reducing the anxiety and anchoring. That'll be going out soon. So, this is for the NF-NLP members, which we're going to start doing stuff once a month, I think, for NF-NLP members, if there's an interest in it, and I know some people reached out and said what they'd like is more, business building and practice building kind of stuff. So I'll be doing that into the future. So if you have any questions, just reach out. And let me